Welcome. Good to see all of you here. Oh, what a wonderful turnout. And what a beautiful day, huh? This is lovely. Beautiful in a lot of ways. A lot of beautiful people coming together, which is what's most enjoyable about it. Some beautiful ideas, some maybe not beautiful ideas. Maybe we can chat through that. And then certainly a beautiful day. My name is Jonathan Anderson, for those of you who don't know me. I teach here at Biola in the art department. And I'm happy to host Joshua Clayton today. Hello, good to see you. For those of you who weren't here in the morning, Joshua presented in the first session, and we're really glad to have him here. Just as if you didn't get the bio the first session, here's a brief bio for Joshua. Joshua is a New York-based artist who has a new media intermedia artistic practice. Would you say intermedia? That's fair.
It's ambiguous. It's hard to describe.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, wonderful.
We have the ability to write.
Yes. What technology. Yes.
Just about to get intermediate.
Yes, right? That's right. So Joshua has a new media intermedia artistic practice, employs digital, analog media technology. It ranges across sculptural installation, web-based environments, the production of ephemeral situations. At least a couple of two works in the gallery right now. If you haven't seen that, by all means go and see that, and perhaps we can talk about that today, depending on how our time goes.
Credit to Alex right here for helping install that show.
Alex Serena, everyone. Yeah, very good. And though a practicing artist, Joshua is assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science at New York University, where he teaches web design, computer programming, and so on. Welcome to Joshua. I suppose we can talk about we want to get to know each of you as well. This is, whereas the rest of the conference is more about presentations, which is good and very valuable. This is a workshop, so it will be much more interactive. We're actually very interested in hearing from all of you rather than just talking at you. We really want to talk with you. So we'll go around and kind of get to know each of you here in a minute. And I'm especially interested in you introducing yourself. Who are you? And perhaps what drew you to this workshop among the other workshops? And it doesn't have to be profound. Maybe it could be. It could be, I don't know. This was the visual one. I don't know. Yeah, right. And then we'll use our technology to keep track. So we'll go around here in just a minute. Perhaps I'll say, as you're kind of considering your self-introduction, perhaps just some brief framing of what we want to do here today, and what has already gone on here today. The purpose of this session, the title of this session is The Expressive Potential of Computational Media. How does binary code actually hold expressive, communicative potential? And specifically, we'll probably end up talking mostly about visual expression.
I think that's fair.
Perhaps, maybe not. Intermedia expression. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And we'll kind of go after that from the premise that digital media is deeply shaping us. It creates environments of mental space and social space, even physical space, that very much shapes us. We shape it, and it shapes us, and we just want to set aside time to kind of think critically about that, reflect about that, as a group, not just us in front of you doing that. If we were to summarize what's already been said, because that has kind of already been part of the presentations thus far, I've really enjoyed the presentations thus far. They seem to be setting up lots of tensions. Each of, not only between the speakers, but it seems like each speaker has been somewhat internally conflicted about digital media. This is creating wonderful possibility and potential for us. And it also is maybe shaping me in some ways that are not helpful. That in many ways, digital media might open up my mental space, social space. In other ways, it might be closing it down and coming with a variety of other consequences that we could beware of or think critically about. And that was the first thing that I noticed from this morning, is it seems like a number of tensions are opening up in the conversation, and we want to devote this time to actually talking through some of those tensions, some of those difficulties. Josh, would you have any kind of takeaways from the morning? I mean, you were part of the morning session, so it's somewhat unfair, but anything strike you as to how those other presentations interacted with yours, or?
I need a little bit more distance.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been in the moment quite adequately to think about it, but I will need to be soon when we have the panel discussion in the afternoon. Yeah, I do. I would echo what you're saying, Jonathan, and I feel like we're talking about things from very different perspectives, and clearly the people who are speaking so far are not all alike in their mindset. Probably not all alike in their interpretation of what this new media condition has given rise to. Some celebrating some aspects more than others, and some deeply skeptical of what the new media condition has resulted in. And so to maybe give you some vocabulary that Jonathan and I kind of were working with and planning for this workshop, I would say that we as humans, and certainly as Christians, need to develop in the present time a pretty healthy, let's say, techno-skepticism alongside of our techno-enthusiasm, if you want to put it that way, right? Because we cannot take this and just be like, everything about the digital revolution is great. People used to think that. In fact, there was a lot of optimism and utopian dialogue around the rise of digital media, and what we hope to explore in this session is the fact that that has certainly not turned out to be all that it was hyped to be. So perhaps we're living in what you might refer to now as the afterglow of the digital revolution, where there are still lots of possibilities, lots of good things, but also a lot of pitfalls to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Good. And we'll go after that in this session. More to come. Should we go all the way around the room, or should we do that in smaller groups?
I would love to hear just a couple sentences, if you wouldn't mind. Your name, maybe why you're here. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like Jonathan said too, the whole idea with this is not to have more of us presenting with you, but to make this an opportunity for conversation among each other and trying to have some kind of constructive dialogue.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Good. So we'll just go around the room briefly.
I'll start. I'm Brent. I'm the director of the MFA program at Azusa Pacific University, and I'm here because I'm a Joshua Clayton groupie.
And by the way, I'm basically here because of Brent Dickinson too. So this is one of my best friends from New York, and we lost him to you guys recently. So.
I'll pass you. I'm Amy. I'm here because this seems like the most interesting option. I wasn't just here listening, so
I hope you're not disappointed.
Oh, I was just going to say, oh yeah, I agree. Yeah.
my name is Summer. and I'm here because I'm interested in digital media and exploring
Yeah.
that. And yes, yeah, it seemed the most interesting, and I feel like you were one of the speakers that I'm like, I could hear him talk a little bit more. But then I didn't like you talking a little bit more. And yeah, it's looking on the list, it's like, well, what are, I feel like things are going to be said that we don't normally hear about, and a lot of the other ones are like, we've heard at Harvard.
That's, you have my vote right now for best response so far.
Well, there's a lot to come. So.
My name is Zahavi Husser, and I work in the McGrath Center for Teaching and Learning at Princeton, and I'm interested in using digital media in my art.
I'm Marika, and I am here partly, like Jess was saying, it seems like the most interesting option about stuff that we don't usually talk about, especially here in the art department at Biola. It's a really interesting medium of art, so I'm interested to hear more about it. And I figured if John was hosting it, it'd probably be really good. So
Right on.
We're going to get that a lot.
yeah.
We're here for John Anderson.
I have one groupie.
You have one
right?
groupie, yep.
These are Jonathan Anderson.
Yay! Fair enough.
Jonathan, we should teach a class together here someday.
That would be amazing. Let's do it.
My name's Jacob. I go here. I don't work in Princeton, so. Yeah.
Not yet. There's lots of life to live.
Yeah. And I'm here because I'm a John Anderson fan and a student as well. And when I was in the morning session, I really liked your work, and I was a fan of how you seem to be like, you are a practicing artist, and it's like your gallery is the internet, which I think is really interesting and a very almost like, it's just a very novel way of thinking about showing your art, and it's the idea that you're documenting it for the whole world to see, it's your website, but it's also your piece. I thought that was really interesting.
Thanks. Cool.
My name is Rachel. I'm here partly because John is teaching as well. And also, I thought in the morning session we talked about GPS and where your location is and how it's kind of off. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. Nice to hear more.
Yeah.
I'm Hope. Yeah, I'm here because Anderson, so I'm not gonna lie. And it also seems interesting, so.
My name's Lauren. I'm here out of curiosity about something I'm not familiar with and just want to learn about it.
Yeah. Good.
I'm Brianna. I was busy this morning, so I wasn't able to attend the symposium until now, and I was meeting Jacob, and he said that John was going to be here, and now hearing about it, it sounds really interesting and really relevant to today, so I'm really excited to be here.
I'm Anamika, and originally came because Marika told me to come to this one. And then now that you guys have talked more about it, I think it's really interesting because I'm someone that I really wanted to stick with traditional media and not even go into digital at all. But I think in the last 6 months or so, I've started seeing how that could actually be really helpful. And so I'm just kind of curious to see how it can be incorporated.
I'm Dan, and I'm here because I really liked a lot of the stuff you showed us this morning, like the stuff on Phnom Penh was really interesting to me. And then I have a class with Jonathan, and kind of stuff we've been touching on, I was interested to hear his take on it in this. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Catherine Takaoka. I heard about this through Saddleback Church, so I came with a couple people from there. And then I was specifically interested in this workshop because I'm a mixed media artist, and during my undergraduate studies, I just graduated, and during my thesis, I started to do some what I considered abstract expressionist painting, with collaging that with digital, my digital photography, because I was interested in how that affected our experience and actually capturing what we experience through memory, which is now so digitized. And then also along with that, my older sister and I have actually talked a lot about binary code in our work. She puts it into her artwork. So.
Cool.
Denise. I'm a retired visual communications professor, and I run a nonprofit called Seeds, doing traveling conceptual art exhibits that we transform gallery spaces into sacred spaces. So I'm always looking at new art. I always want to know what's on the crest of the wave, and I've got to keep up with things, so I'm here.
And Denise, if people were interested in Seeds, getting involved in Seeds, where could they go if they?
Very easy. Just come to me. I'll hand you a business card. We just finally got our new website up.
Good.
And so we're working on 3 separate exhibits. We've shown here at Biola. I taught here at Biola. We've been at all the mega churches and the universities around, and now we're going to civic museums. So our ministry is right in the heart of downtown LA, and wanting to raise funds to go across the nation with.
Yeah.
3 exhibits.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, John.
Good. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm a fan of Jonathan.
It's good to have you here, Denise. Yeah.
Oh, I'm Alex. Probably here out of like a lack of knowledge about digital media, but being an art student, looking at modern art, seeing how that is so, I guess, hot today. Like everything you see, it has something to do with like video or performance or some kind of like involving digital space. So wanting to learn more about that. Also doing 4D design and incorporating that to my work. I don't know, just wanting to gain more knowledge about that. So.
Good.
Let me talk about that before we go further, and then we'll move on from there. We're living in a time that some people, specifically a theorist in New York by the name of Marissa Olson, has referred to as post-internet. And you might think of this like after the internet or something. And essentially what this is referring to, and I think what Alex is talking about addresses this point, is we're living in a time right now where we're not just putting work online, right? We're not just seeing, although certainly the internet can be a gallery in a sense as well. But we're living in a time where networked culture has so permeated our everyday living that it's just seeped into the way that we interact with each other and make work already. Even if it has nothing to do with, even if it's not a digital medium or if it's not on the web or anything, this notion that art is basically all out now is post-internet, in the sense that we're all influenced by the effects of networked communications, even if we're not directly dealing with this in our work.
I'm Ben Miller, and I'm a linguist, but I enjoy reading about technology and art and how they interact.
Yeah.
So I'm a big consumer of digital media.
Yeah, I'm Sarah, and I'm just kind of exploring different mediums right now. And this seemed really interesting. Like I wanted to know more about it, and I'm also a web designer, so I felt like I could relate to some of the concepts.
Yeah, good.
I'm Amanda. I'm here because I really enjoy digital media, and I like to do some sort of work with it.
Yeah, good. We'll start in the front, I guess.
All right, my name's Nick. I'm super interested in coming to this because a lot of my interest with art has been like how do we mix the different medias, like specifically like how do we take like what's physically tangible with like things that are digital, and like how do those mix, and like how can we use these as a means to like express the gospel and even like meet people where they're at through art. Because I'm a Christian ministries major, and so it's like, for me, I was just really interested in what you guys had to say on that stuff, and how, like, I don't know, just super interesting how things can mix, because it's such an open world when you begin to mix things.
Yeah, so I'm Tony, and I'm in this class because I can see myself in this field, and all the other classes didn't really seem exciting to me. That's why I'm here.
All right. Very good.
My name is Kira, and I have a brother who's a math and physics major, so I was very interested in what you said this morning about being a scientist and an artist, because I've been thinking a lot about how to integrate science in my art and how to make those two work together. And this My name is Mariah, and I would say, yeah, just like a lot of people, like I'm kind of unfamiliar with this sort of medium, but I would really, yeah, I think it's very applicable, obviously, and good to be informed about that stuff. But I wish I could have gone to the panel this morning, but I couldn't. So.
I think Barry said it will be posted in a few weeks' time if you want to catch the video later.
On the CCCA website. It should be there. Yeah.
And I'm Devin, and I'm here because this seems to be the most relevant to any modern art practice, even if I don't get into digital media.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. Because even if you're painters or whatever, you're still post-internet.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually your work, honestly, is more viewed on the internet than it is in person. Right? Yeah.
Jeff, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah.
I'm Jeff Rao, and I'm interested in the subject because I just curated a show about digital media. Really great artist is Joshua Clayton, and I think it might...
Will you be one of my groupies too?
Well, I'm a Joshua Clayton groupie as well, so...
We could be swayed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't even know John was teaching this until I showed up. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
You know what? Let's start with some questions, actually.
Okay.
Because this seems like it's already rolling.
So yeah.
Let's just start out. We had something else that we were going to jump right into right now, but I don't want to go there quite yet. I just want to open it up to some conversation. So I don't know if anybody already has some questions on their mind that they want to ask, or if you just want to even throw out some ideas. It can be in the form of like, I heard you say this, but I don't really know about this. This is another thing I heard during this session, and I'm kind of, this is interesting, or just general questions. Anyone have something like that right now?
I heard you talk earlier about like the expressive qualities of binary code.
Yeah.
And some of my understanding is that like binary code can actually like equal all of these, or there's actually a code for like, I don't know, all of these different attributes, for example, and I'm interested in how that translates into, like for example, you were saying things about colors.
Yeah.
Like there's a binary code for maybe like yellow ochre
Yep.
or like for something. So I'm interested in that relationship.
Yeah.
Do you want this?
No, because I'll speak loudly.
Okay.
I'll be
Is that okay if we just talk loudly?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So the best way I can explain it is with sound, right? Does anybody know what a CD is? It's really retro, dude. Right, so if you ever buy a CD or if you ever purchased a CD that you wanted to listen to later on an iPod or a phone or something like that, that analog signal needs to be converted to a digital signal. Does anybody know what the difference between analog and digital media is? Because this really gets at the heart of your question. Does anybody want to take a guess at that? What are we even talking about when we say analog versus digital?
Analog is like the physical form of it, right?
That's a good guess, and that's kind of along the way, but it's not technically about physicality specifically. Because digital media is physical too, actually, and that like brings up a whole other conversation, which I'll mention just briefly. Right? So anytime we talk about digital media, and especially with vocabulary these days like the cloud, right? What is the cloud? It feels so ethereal, doesn't it? But the cloud in reality is a bunch of servers that have to live somewhere, usually in highly protected areas with a lot of redundant energy backing up those servers so that if one fails, you can still check your status on Facebook or something like that, right? So all the digital media that we're talking about, regardless of what we're using it for, including your Gmail account, including any social media, including files that you store on the web, needs to live somewhere. Information is physical. And if we stop associating data with physicality, then we start to kind of trail off in, again, some of that naive utopianism of what the digital revolution was about, when in fact there are real energy resources being consumed to sustain this digital infrastructure that we've just come to accept, and not even think about what is the relative cost of storing a 100 megabyte file in our Gmail account or something like that. Coming back to the analog digital thing, an analog signal is continuous. A digital signal is discrete. That's the definition, right? When you're talking about an analog signal, you're talking about one that can look like this. This would be, for example, a sound wave. Right? Sine wave that sounds like this. It's a continuous form that relates to the vibrations that are going on in the air that your ear receives, and you have these little follicles in your ear that receive those vibrations. This cannot be reproduced digitally because of its continuous quality. A digital signal, on the other hand, is discrete. That means it's only like yes or no. This is, again, why the digital is inherently not nuanced and shade in chromatics, basically. Because in order to convert this analog signal to a digital signal, we need to sample it, right? So every, like, thousands of times, literally, we need to do this. We need to say, where are we right now? Where are we right now? Where are we right now? And these become numbers, right? Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, which if we do that enough times, then we have the ability to translate this continuous signal to a digital signal that computers understand and can play back for you. So when we're talking about the difference between analog and digital, we're talking about what it is to be continuous as opposed to being discrete. Now, this is the beginning of what we're talking about when we transfer, something like a sound wave to something like a color, right? Same thing is going on here, except the difference is that we're talking about a screen. A screen is a physical manifestation of digital information. So when we talk about a screen, we're talking about digital information that has been converted to 3 discrete units, red, green, and blue, right? And the varying degrees, the numeric value, usually on a scale of 0 to 255 for red, 0 to 255, 0 to 255 for green, combine in, again, some numeric fashion to reproduce color that you see on a screen. The advantage of this, so the disadvantages of this are manifest, right? We are reducing physical phenomena in the real world to units of ones and zeros and numeric. The advantages of this is that now it becomes much more malleable. Now we can say, what relationship, like Kandinsky, the old sort of synesthetic notion that sound and image can combine in this kind of magical way. So if we're combining these things, if we're combining these things digitally, it's not an issue anymore, because now if we can encode this with numbers, just like we can encode this with numbers, we can, for example, that Phnom Penh video piece is doing something similar, where it's scanning the video image over the course of the performance to convert that digital pixel information to sound, and therefore you get this kind of associative action going on between the screen and the sounds that you're hearing. Is that a helpful starting point? It's a long answer, actually. Maybe I won't get any more questions.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Phnom Penh?
Yeah, what were you actually manipulating with your iPad as you were doing that?
Sure. So with that piece, it doesn't have to be an iPad, by the way. So that was not specifically about using an iPad, but it's easy to do with an iPad because, like many smart devices these days, there are sensors inside. These are low-cost sensors that you can buy relatively easily from places like Adafruit and SparkFun. And just with a little bit of knowledge of code, you can then take the information that those sensors give you. In this case, it's called an accelerometer. And an accelerometer basically allows you to track what is the tilt and pan of an object that you might be holding or working with. By the way, these accelerometers are also in your computer. It's how, if you drop your computer, it knows it's falling because the accelerometer data changes rapidly, and so the computer knows to shut down, and it might not wreck your whole hard drive. I'm getting into the too technical side of it. What it's important to note is that I'm just taking that information from the accelerometer data inside the set of the sensor inside the iPad and using that as the way that the video then is controlled, right? So anytime I guess this is tilt, right, this way. Tilt then controls how bright or dark the video is, and then pan, left to right, controls whether the video is going forward or backward and at what speed. So again, we're talking about digital media as material, not digital media for digital media's sake. And this is another key point that I think I should mention early on, which is that we're not here, I hope, because digital media is just great and it's the end to all of our problems and it's the best way to make art. We're here, in my opinion, because digital media offers a lot of potential for doing stuff, not just because it's cool and of the moment, but because it's so much a part of everything else that we do, then why not incorporate it into our creative work as well?
I have a response to the sensors. So hypothetically, you could do something like create something where you attach those sensors to people that they then could wear, and then it could be recorded, and that could be data that is recorded and shown as a visual.
Sure, and Jeff, would you like to talk about that?
Do I?
Yeah.
Well,
because maybe I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can out you right now. But you want to tell about your project?
Yeah. Well, I've sure. I guess in a small way, not super sophisticated, but I've been kind of exploring a little bit of that too. That using GPS information if you're driving somewhere and you enter the directions into your Gmail or into Google Maps or something like that, it draws a trace of the path that you're going to follow, and then it follows you as you go along that way. Well, I picked up a pretty simple little hiking GPS tracker that I carried around for actually a whole year just to record basically everywhere that I went for a year. And I haven't yet figured out exactly how that's going to manifest into work, but one of the things I was interested in is just essentially the abstract scribbles that wind up being the resulting tracing of just my steps going through every day. So all of the sort of complex things that involve my work schedule, meetings with friends, shows that I want to go to, whatever, winds up changing the course of my path every day. And so I wind up with a whole series of these kind of abstract drawings that are really just the result of tracing my steps over the course of a day. So I guess that's one manifestation of using that type of data to then create a visual. And what I've been looking at is abstracting that from the map. So rather than imposing out a map now where you can say, oh, well, he drove north on the 605 and went east on the 91. Now, it just becomes a drawing, almost a scribble, a little vector graphic that is abstracted from that physical space and just becomes a visual unto itself.
And so what did you want to say something too? Go ahead.
I mean, and it's potentially scalable. I'm thinking, so you fly to the Midwest or something.
Yeah, totally.
The scribble gets
really long and thin.
Really long and thin, whereas if you include all of the scribble, it's very tight for the most part, where you live your life. I'm thinking of this kind of fractal, zooming in infinitely, zooming out infinitely, a kind of scalable drawing.
Yeah, and one of the ways in which my work and Jeff's is alike is we're both interested in infrastructure aesthetics. And so in his project particularly, it's a collaboration between his daily routine and the city that he inhabits, or the various transportation infrastructures that make his passage through the city possible, whether it's, I guess for you guys, mostly by car, or plane if you're flying somewhere else. But what does that say then about one's relationship to the city, as well as how do you make stuff out of this? And of course, we're doing this, and it's not unfamiliar to hear about people doing stuff like that anymore. And yet the possibilities for this are continue to expand, especially with the invention of these devices that people wear every day now. I don't have one, but what is it, the Jawbone and the Apple Watch when that comes out, and all these different ways that are actually going to be keeping track of you, whether you like it or not, right? And so we need to be aware of this both because we can use it constructively and also because it can be used even if we don't want that information accessible to other people. Generally speaking, it seems like the devices that are out right now are not abusing people's information, but the potential is certainly there. Just like one's email account can be hacked, right? So can the data that you accumulate on a regular basis. Certainly, it's already the case with your use of the internet, right? It's very naive to think that our activity on the internet is solely our own discretion and something that is, just a private act. There are all kinds of algorithms that are surveying the way that we go through, and there ends up being this trail of our sort of web history that is even accessible to other websites when we go to them, which is, again, is interesting, but also something to be aware of. Good question. Let's have a couple more. Yeah.
Do you consider your specific computational media, or do you still consider that a frontier? I guess that's very brand new and very few people are doing it.
I don't like the term new media at all. I use it as a sort of fallback when people want a little bit more context. Mm-hmm. I mean, I generally say artist a little bit more than I say new media artist, and I definitely don't say digital artist. I use the term new media to not encompass just the digital. I still consider video and even I would say analog tape to be historically new media, right? These are still relatively recent inventions in the broader context of art making, which has a long and rich history of sculpture in marble and paint in oil. So when we're even talking about something like a record player, historically speaking, we're talking about new media. And I'm interested in the potential of all of those new things. I do still think that digital media the potential of digital media has not been exhausted in the same way that traditional media have been thoroughly executed. And I'm not saying that traditional media have been thoroughly exhausted either, but yet there's more space to explore things that haven't been done yet, especially at that intersection, the hybrid space of digital and analog media these days. And I don't really like work that's just about digital stuff. I do make stuff that's exclusively to be received in a web-based context, but I would never make that only my practice. So one of the pieces, for example, that I have in the exhibition right now is specific, not intentionally created this way, but really you can't experience it except in person. And I think as soon as we fetishize digital media and the web as being sufficient, then we're starting to kind of get into this disembodied realm where we're saying oh, it's just about my mind and what I receive intellectually and process, and is starting to get away from the importance of the body being together in space like we are right now, right? What if I was talking to you from a webcam back in New York City? That would be well, at least Jonathan is here. So the importance of the intersection and affirming the physical and embodied experience, even as we augment it with digital media. Anyway, yeah.
Just in light of all the conversations that have already started, what are your thoughts on web media and digital media and permanence and temporality? What would you say can be expressed with that aspect of it?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. Do you want to start with anything? Maybe you've thought about this too. It's awesome, actually. I really like it, especially because I'm not in it for the money, right? So performance art. Somebody familiar with performance art, right? The whole idea behind performance art, as it became a thing in the 60s and 70s, especially with people like Marina Abramovich, was the idea that you cannot commodify this, right? The art market is incredibly institutionalized and financialized in ways that make it hard to sincerely make work for your appreciation of art and ideas and whatever you want to do. And so performance art...
She just made a Nike commercial.
I know.
Yeah, so there we go, right? And she's making this really expensive new performance art center up in Hudson now. So Everybody sells out of some no, sorry, can you redact that part? I don't mean that, because actually that's the problem. Like, sell out actually doesn't even mean the same thing anymore, because it's hard to even separate the idea of making money from making art when so much of the way that things are experienced is mediated through commerce these days. Getting back to your point about the web, I really like the web's ephemerality, and that's one of the reasons that I specifically make projects for the web, is because it's hard to say, this is a piece that you can buy and own and experience, in a sort of consumer relationship. Certainly there's still a consumer aspect to art making and art viewing, but I'm interested in strategies that can actually evade the commodification of art at times as well. And the other thing about that I'll just mention before I go too much on a tangent is that it also means it's harder to archive. So there are entire departments at MoMA, for example, devoted to archiving new media work. And it's a huge hassle for some of these people, requiring cross-disciplinary expertise, so that a piece like of early computer art that was written in the 60s, for example, might not only be obsolete in terms of the hardware that it was written for and on, but maybe even the coding language itself might require somebody who knows that coding language to actually update it so that it can still be viewed. So this means that you cannot guarantee, if you're making work in that context, that it's necessarily going to perpetuate, again, like a marble sculpture might have 1,000 years ago. It also means that you need to be diligent if you are committed to that, unless you are at a place where you can hire assistants to actually maintain that work as well. So, for example, the Fukushima sequence project that I showed, I literally, within the past 3 months, recently revisited and recoded that project because it was 10 years old and was close to becoming less accessible on the web. And it was very important to me because that's an important piece to me to go back and recode it, not only so that you could still see it, but also because I wanted to make it more open and accessible. So I wrote it in a language specifically more geared towards the open web. So anybody actually can view the source code of that project. Anybody can see exactly how it's made. And so the web also sort of demystifies some of what it is to be a maker these days, because it's not like, oh, how did you create that color on a canvas or something. It can actually be something that you share with people, and then other people can learn from that as well. And then it's like, oh, that's really neat. I want to maybe take some of your code and work with it in my project. And so the act of making becomes a catalyst for more making, and so that's pretty cool too.
It's a strange kind of ephemerality, though, the web, isn't it? Because it's actually always being archived constantly. So that it, in a sense, visiting your site is an extremely ephemeral experience, and there's nothing to take away from it, and yet it will always be there, or always exist, assuming the archiving computer.
Yeah, but the thing about that is it sometimes requires a specific version of a specific browser running on a specific operating system to view that piece, right? So it works fine right now, but who knows in 10 years if it's going to work the same way. I mean, NASA has had this problem for years, where they're generating more data than storage capacity allows them to maintain, right? So how much do you keep, and how much do you get rid of? And I think that the problem on a much smaller scale is similar for artists these days in kind of wading through media. But one of the solutions to this, in case you really want to geek out on this particular talk, is version control. So if you ever start to incorporate code into your work, consider a version control system, or VCS, that would allow you to keep track of your code and see the versions of it over time. The one that's most popular right now is GitHub. And a lot of people, including artists and not just programmers, use GitHub as a way to store an archive of the work that they're doing. Interesting. Jeff, you had a question?
Well, I was interested in, I think we talked a little bit about the embodied affecting digital, or taking things like sensors and recording our physical experience in an electronic way, but I was interested in, or going to ask, I guess, what your thoughts were in going back the other way, because it seems, and you mentioned it a little bit, and certainly the Phnom Penh Drift project is very much that, where you're trying to take, I guess as that project for you has existed previously as a web project, and has been recently, revisioned as a more kind of embodied piece that now is controlled through the physical sensors. Like, I guess I'm curious to see, or what your thoughts are about work that is maybe moving back from the digital space into a more embodied experience, and different ways that maybe you're approaching that in your practice.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do feel like all digital media is physical at some point. And so when we try to fool ourselves into thinking this exists in this space called the cloud, and it doesn't have a digital form, like at the very most fundamental level. For example, the bit, right? That unit of measurement that we talked about at the beginning, that's roughly equivalent to plus or minus 5 volts, right? So that's actually electricity at its most, even if you go further down than the bit itself if you want to, that's roughly equivalent to plus 5 volts or negative 5 volts. So anytime something does manifest itself in a more physical form, and we certainly see this in artists and other makers' use of new technologies like 3D printing, then again, we're sort of re-embodying something that was physical to begin with, but giving it a form that makes more sense to us in terms of something we can touch or that occupies space differently than our everyday reality of digital media does. So I guess I'll just say, yeah, I'm on that same wavelength with you on that. Not directly answering the question, but.
Are there other projects that you have in the works where you're, and I don't know, maybe you don't want to give away your trade secrets, but I guess other ways that you're trying to specifically look at ways that the embodied experience can, I guess, be more directly, the content can be applied to a directly physical experience?
Yeah, not exactly in the way that you're talking about, but I've been thinking a little bit more lately about the raw materials that actually go into the manufacture of computers these days, right? Because when we think about our computers as these things that we spend all this time with, we normally think of them as pretty devices in like sleek cases. But there's all kinds of stuff going on inside in terms of the raw materials that make computing possible. And I'm not just interested in them because I like minerals, but there's something aesthetically interesting about minerals, but there's also something really important about the labor conditions of those minerals' extraction from the earth, which we don't like to talk about, right? Because sometimes there's some pretty seriously abominable conditions that people are working under to actually extract the minerals from the earth that go into our iPhones or Androids or our Mac computers and stuff like that. And so how can we kind of connect a little bit more what it is to surf the web, for example, with the reality of the various labor conditions that also make the digital revolution possible?
So you're talking about developing a techno skepticism,
yeah,
in addition to a techno enthusiasm. Could you so you've maybe touched on a few, so I feel like I have a sense of maybe a short list of things that you might caution us towards developing that skepticism. But the idea of so like physicality might be one of the things that you put on the list. Another might be the ability of our government to surveil us,
yeah,
right? Like the privacy issues. What else is on the list?
Cool. That's where we're going next.
Oh.
Right. So, as if I planted you. Right? Yeah. I have a lot of answers to that question that I have thought through, not fully, but somewhat. So I thought what we would do next is actually break up into small groups, because this could be more productively achieved in maybe groups of 4 or 5 each. So let me give you a moment to do that. Just groups of 4 or 5. This won't take a long time, but I want you to interact with each other a little bit more too.
So 4 or 5, introduce yourselves so you know who you're talking with?
That was Awareness? Let's just say awareness.
I'm like, so
In what way? And the other one was actually interesting because we talked about Expressive and Biola, just a live shot video that I sent together. We're going to take time to actually record live GPS data from Biola, but just around yesterday, like when you $5 I offered that, but he said it's actually easier because he has a simple module to like run it live. So he was like, I'd have to go there and run the module, which is
Okay, everyone. We have only 20 minutes left, so I want to make good use of the time. This is group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, group 6. That worked out perfectly. You guys are great. So glad. Seriously. It's the Jonathan Anderson effect. All right, here's what I want to do. I actually want you to explore these things in your groups. Take a few minutes, take 5 minutes to go around, and each group has a topic that I want you to talk about among yourselves. So group 1, I want you to talk about the digital revolution's effects on attentiveness / distractedness. Group 2, I want you to talk about the private-public dynamic at play in this new digital landscape. Group 3, environmental conditions, environmental awareness. Group 4, what is our current relationship to place, or how are we sort of decontextualized and placeless? Again, I'm not trying to make these just automatically all positive, negative things. I want you to just discuss these. Group 5, talk about connectedness and the implications of constant connectedness, right, as we are currently. And 6, this one's the hardest one, but I think you guys are fine. I want you guys to think about, I'm going to give you some leads on this one. When we talk about binary forms of thinking, what does it mean as humans, and especially as Christians, to only think in black and white, or yes or no, 1 or 0, right? So that's where I want you guys to explore. This is not a lot of time to talk about this, but I want each of you to take each group to take at least 5 minutes to engage with this subject together, and then have one representative who can kind of summarize your conversation after that. Go for it.
For me, like, I am a digital artist. I do photography, and I work
At least that particular piece, yeah. It's in a good way. Yeah, definitely. It's like saying, I think that the dream, even though some people feel like the dream itself has been institutionalized. Press against the way that landscape and city design is specifically geared towards saying this is how you're supposed to pass through. Don't linger, don't wander. So it's kind of against that. Yeah. That's exactly it, yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Nice. Obscure, yeah. Wait, oh, that's good, dude. That's solid. I should incorporate that into my statement. What else do you think? I think we're fine. How about I'll just expand on that and you can kind of close it with any other final
I think I'm better at it. Let's just shift our but we do kind of aware of the gaps. Because most of the time they're not really significant. But I guess one of the biggest areas that are laid out is things like driving. And the way that listening to radio versus trying to create a conversation. Plays out.
We all saying, oh, this first stuck out and we literally have this Bible study school and it was really good. Yes. And the media wasn't intended for Bible study, but just
You can switch back and forth feeling
we're actually paying attention to environment and commons is just really the lack of clarity in both understanding more customary to see a painting.
What I'm saying is like that's the strategy.
Yeah, whereas like you're just flipping through the internet and see pictures like
the reality is
unless I like so I think that's kind of
that house first. And you thought
they share that environment whereas you still need context and it's really understand
and you didn't even realize it. You thought it
I think that's also hard too because it's like we want to share past experience. There's some age, like certain things will you can write a whole biography on someone could go on their video and not getting back at all.
Is there that, I mean, like, I feel like in some ways it's a, like.
All right, everyone, let's tie it back together. 30 seconds.
Yeah, you start to sound like
again, a lot of their progress connotation. People look at like the physical and like
Set that out. Go ahead, yeah. So let's pull it back together here. So we'll pull it back together. We want to hear what you were talking about in your groups. We're probably running short on time, so maybe we'll ask one person from each group to just kind of report back. What are you thinking about these issues? And whoever that person is reporting back, you keep it concise, keep it short. And we'll just work our way through the So I suppose we'll start with group one, distractedness, attentiveness.
They nominated me to speak on their behalf.
Beautiful.
We talked, well, we're older than you guys are, so we mostly were talking about you guys. You're the problem. But we cited NPR. You guys don't even know what NPR is. Oh, you're firing me. Okay, so to keep it fair. So we were just talking about that it does seem like as we all are endeavoring to multitask to greater levels of efficiency and multi, levels, like adding to those layers more and more, that we have increasing inability to dig deeper into those things, and it seems like there's studies out there that seem to back that notion up.
So in a way, digital media makes us attentive to more things than we could ever be at any point in history, but we pay costs with that in terms of the depth of attentiveness to those things that we're paying attention. Is that right? Is that what you're talking about?
One thing that was really interesting that we talked about was how, what was his name again? Jeff was talking about how we can think that we're attentive to a bunch of things at the same time, but there's studies that actually show that we're just switching in between a bunch of different things, like one after the other. And I think that's an interesting part of it. Like we think that we're being attentive, but we're really just constantly distracted.
Yeah, good. For sake of time, we'll go on.
Thank
We'll
you.
see if we can get back to it. Yeah, thank you. Group two, the private and the public in digital media. What'd you come up with?
We talked about two different
idea of like viewing art that's made digitally. So like online you see it as a real deal rather than like if you like a picture of painting. Online it's like not anything. It's like the same. It's like what is like the authenticity of the art that we view online, and then we almost take it as like just like swiping through and like we just start like taking notice of things, and so we've just seen that before. And we went the other like idea of private public, to where like the question of like why are we like so okay with like our generation, like our parents are like, well, change your password every 2 weeks because of like your privacy, and then we're like,
all of them?
I don't care. Like we're so we're all like aware that like everything that we do online is public, but it's almost we find comfortability in like privateness and how broad everything is, and we're like, well, who's really going to seek me out, sort of thing. And I think we're just so used to it being so vast that we almost find that like our spot in the internet is very insignificant, and so we feel private in that.
That's a great point. Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful, actually. That's good.
There's a weird, I don't know if you all feel this, there's also a weird sense increasingly with digital media that I feel where my privacy is public, or I'm sort of fashioning my private space for public perception. The Facebook page is kind of the classic example of a private view that is meant for public. And so you go through your private life actually scanning for public moments, like this could be a great Instagram post, right? The whole life becomes strangely public in a very private. Like your private life becomes a public spectacle.
The other great story about that, maybe some of you noticed it or heard about it, was just a long essay posted to the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about a woman who was traveling to South Africa and had some time to kill before she took her plane, and wrote this really insensitive and kind of thoughtless and what could be easily interpreted as this racist comment to her Twitter feed, and she had maybe like 100 followers. But somebody picked it up, and between the time that she took off from, I think it was London, and arrived in South Africa, she was fired, her life was ruined, and basically she was the scorn she was the top trending tweet by the time she arrived in South Africa, because she just wasn't thinking about it, and she was like, whatever, who's reading this? But her entire life was destroyed over the course of that flight, just because she was like, blah, 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 and kind of that same mentality. And it's like, whoa, that doesn't even resonate with us, because we feel like we're completely, almost anonymous, even if we have a few followers or something like that. So that story resonates a lot with what you're talking about for me. We don't have even time to talk more about it. Let's go on to the next one.
Number 3, environmental concerns.
Yeah, so we touched on a few different things, but mostly we're talking about like how the internet and photography can shape our view of the environment and with digital media and like screen spaces and resolution and websites and all of that, how it can affect and like positively influence or distort our idea of different environments. We also talked about how digital media can kind of transport us to different environments without actually needing to be physically there. That's kind of the gist of it. I mean, we talked about a lot of different things, but I mean, if anyone else has something to add to that.
And almost how you're not aware of your environment when you're in kind of this digital space. You just kind of enter into it, and unlike a gallery where you're, say I'm looking at a picture online, like there could be 3,000 people looking at this picture and I'm completely unaware of it, whereas if you're in a gallery and 3,000 people are standing there looking at this picture, you would definitely notice that, and stuff like that, and so it kind of separates you in this weird bubble.
And in terms of environmental, to kind of expand on that, in terms of environmental stewardship and health, there are really huge issues to talk about here. I mean, on the one hand, we talk about going paperless as kind of environment for the sake of environmental stewardship, but the flip side of that is
e-waste,
mining and e-waste. Yeah. The stuff never disappears. It's full of mercury and all sorts of things.
Yeah, there's a life cycle to the products that we use and don't think about. Even when we recycle them, they need to go somewhere, and sometimes again, the conditions where they go are serious. But I'm intrigued by how you interpreted this, because I think this is another important point about it, the way that our relationship to the environment changes because we don't necessarily need to go outside to see nature, right? Fourth group.
Oh, we talked about it in two ways. One was how we engage the place where we are now, and how like we interact with, like, we can be here and we're all sitting here, but we can also be in another place and pick up our phones.
Yeah.
And we're no longer here. And then also how we're engaging all the other places around you. You can watch a live video stream in Moscow right now. You
Yeah.
can talk to your family over Skype. You can engage all these different places, all the different news medias and everything. That you're not necessarily, I mean, you're not confined to one place. The world is kind of open up to you, so it could be a positive and it can also be a negative because you're taking places for granted and you're also taking like where you are at for granted in a way. Or you could have everything. You can interact with your family and your friends.
Great. And which is deeply connected to Group 1's conversation too, right? If only we could be more disciplined about the potential of the interconnectedness that we have. Like if only we weren't so addicted to the ambient information of always having some little sort of dopamine infusion from checking a status update or something like that. If only we just used it when we needed it rather than feeling like we always needed to be using it. Might be better. It would be better.
What would be an example of using it when you needed it?
Good, good. So for example, when you have downtime, do you immediately check your phone, right? I'm not saying you specifically, but just posing the question, like why is it important, or is that the best use of downtime if you're just hanging out and nothing's going on, or you're waiting for someone, or you're riding in a car? Is that the best use of your time to default to your phone? Because for most people, that is the default these days. So no for you, right? You're shaking your head no?
I would say for a lot of us, I think we could be doing better things than checking our phones.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think that a lot of times I'm happy to check my phone because I need some of the information and I'm glad to have it. But it becomes so habitual that you always go for it even if you don't need it. And so that's really hard to train yourself out of that. I think knee-jerk reaction like, oh, what's going on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, when like it's a beautiful day, for example, right? And someone's posting a picture about how beautiful a day it is. You're like, oh yeah, it's so great. Right?
Well, Louis C.K., the comedian, said a really good thing. I think he was like on Simon Bryan or something when he said it. And it's gone really viral, like this thing that he said. But he introduced a really interesting idea of our deep, kind of unstated fear of feeling lonely.
Yeah.
And that there's this, we do have this, we developed this kind of inability to go there with ourselves, which I think he would say, I would probably agree, is an important place to go from time to time. The realization that we are alone, that seems real human, and that our phone, our news feed can be a thing that keeps us from that. The notion of distractedness. We never have to really feel that.
Good. Yeah, thanks.
Actually, it's a great transition.
Yeah, sure.
Fifth group?
Yeah, we brought up, there was a lot of good points made, but it kind of revolved around social media, just that's kind of the means of connection. Nick mentioned how we're always connected to someone via our phone, social media, like we always have access to someone else and multiple people at once. Like we could be FaceTiming someone while texting someone, while emailing, whatever. And how like just technology advancing, invention of the phone, now we have email, now there's Messenger, anyone on your Facebook can basically text you, have access to you all at once. And how social media is this really interesting space where you can connect with people and know about someone without ever actually having a physical interaction with them. And how that is mediated not just to you, because they're not talking to you, but they're talking to an audience, which is you, their other friends, their family. So they have to mediate that for like, how will my family receive this? How will my friends receive this? So that kind of distorts your perception of them, and also how we rely so much on social media for our connection. Even in real life, like I don't remember the last time I received a physical invitation to like, oh, come to this event or come to my party or come to whatever. It's all on Facebook, and all you have to do is click a button, yes or no, maybe. But yeah, just to like, you don't actually have to talk to the person, say, oh yeah, I'll be there, oh no, like whatever. You just click a button. And even like wedding invites. Nick mentioned how he's like friends have been like, hey, we're getting married, and they'll send like a little invite, like, hey, come to my wedding. So just seeing how much that influences like our social interactions. So that was really interesting, and seeing how all of this can be like most people said, good and bad, because it can like create kind of this shallow, like a very shallow awareness of other people, like not really genuine interactions. But it can also be very good and very helpful. I've had like Google Doc Bible studies with people, which has been really great.
Right on.
When I haven't been able to connect with them physically.
That's great.
So ultimately, we just kind of ended on the note that we have to be very intentional about using like this technology as a tool for like actual connection and actual interaction.
Right, not the technology as an end in itself, but a tool to actually get people together. Great. Let's leave it there, because that's a really great point. And I want to make sure I give some time to Group 6 too, because this is a hard one. But what did you guys come up with?
We basically we focus on two main areas. We focus like on art and then general worldview. So in terms of art, we talked about meaning and like good or bad art, and like there's really no absolute way of saying, oh, this is good or oh, this is bad art. Like arguments can be made for either side of anything. Even if you think it's rubbish, your best friend will think it's the best thing in the world. So in that way, and also meaning that you don't really have that much control over what meaning is. You can't make a work and say this is what this means and nothing else. Like for you yourself, like it changes over the course of making or often a few years. And everyone else will experience it differently because of their different personalities and contexts and everything. So yeah, in art, there's no absolute like meaning or like way of measuring how good it is. And then with worldview, we were talking about, I think as Christians, absolute truth is a foundational part of Christianity. So by saying we're Christians, we're accepting that yes, there's absolute truth, so there's something that's absolutely right and absolutely wrong. And we can discover that to a large extent from the Bible. But the world has come up with a lot of like gray areas for us, and we were talking about how like the right and wrong is absolute, but the gray areas come in like how you talk to people about it and handle it like with personal connections, because it's not helpful to be like black and white, like, oh, you're doing something wrong, just change, or like, whatever you're going to help. Like that's not a very helpful way of dealing with people. So bringing gray areas into that.
Thanks, you guys.
Do you want to speak to that at all, or?
I think feel free to. I'm good.
Okay. Good. Thank you for all of that. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I think we're, in some ways, just really getting going.
You guys are awesome. That was good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Just maybe one kind of a closing statement here, and then cut you loose. There's lots of argument about what art is. We couldn't adjudicate that here right now. But we might agree that art is that which facilitates and fosters attentiveness. Whatever art form. It's that which makes us attentive to the thing, to the lives we're living, as John Cage says. It wakes us up to the lives we're living. This process of highlighting some of these tensions that we feel about digital media, the digital lives that we live. Perhaps we enter them as artists with a concern to be attentive, to foster attentiveness to the lives we're living in digital forms, digital media. Does that seem like a good place to leave it?
Right on.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, bless you. Thank you for being here.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.